about community gardens. Give me 1 second and I'll start the slideshow in just 1 second. So I have 4 different schools on the line who are going to share with you how their on-campus or community gardens got started and sort of what they're used for now and how they use those gardens to impact their current campus kitchen programming. In addition to supplying fresh produce to their meals, how they use that to kind of do their go beyond the meal programming. These gardens are all on different scales and used at different ways, though I was noticing that a lot of them started about 3 years ago, so they're all sort of the same age, which is great. But we're hoping that this call will give you an opportunity to ask some questions or maybe spark some ideas about how the garden might be a good opportunity to grow your campus kitchen. And before we get started, one last thing. I have personally been having phone issues over at the national office today, so if I drop out, I apologize, but I'll be calling back in. But in the meantime, if that happens, Emily, our program manager and campus kitchen coordinator at Gonzaga, will take the lead. So without further ado, Emily, would you please share with us about your community garden over there at Gonzaga?
Absolutely. So like Linda said, I am the coordinator at the campus kitchen at Gonzaga University. In 2009, 2 AmeriCorps Vistas came to me and they wanted to build a garden for the campus kitchen. I knew already that there had been several, actually 15 garden proposals written to the university, and they had all been denied over the years. But I went ahead and asked. And for some reason, they said yes, which I'm still surprised to this day because they're very particular about their grounds here. But the following year, we went ahead and built our garden, and it is wonderful. It is a 15-bed raised garden. 3 of the beds are oversized, big gardens. We also have a greenhouse. It's kind of an interesting partnership between CASEL here at Gonzaga, which is the Center for Community Action and Service Learning, and the Campus Kitchens Project, the university. We've got several partnerships through the garden. Gonzaga, through CASEL, helps us pay for kind of capital improvements in the garden. So things that will not be used up are purchased by CASEL. They bought us a bench last year. We're making some improvements to our greenhouse that they'll be paying for. And then the Campus Kitchens Project takes care of things that will be used up, like the seeds and the dirt and fertilizer, things like that. Partnerships, we have service learning students that help us with the garden. We oftentimes bring in outside groups. We had a work group from L'Arche, which provides opportunity for folks with developmental disabilities. We've had them come over and do work in our garden. We always have groups from the mentoring programs here on campus. We bring in low-income elementary school students Monday through Friday during the school year. We always do nutrition education through the garden and environmental education as well. In the spring, they get to help us plant tomatoes, and then they get to take home a tomato plant. So that's kind of a dual purpose there. They're learning about where food comes from, that food actually comes from plants and not just out of a box from the store. And they also get to take that plant home. So hopefully it encourages them to get excited about growing food and eating healthier. We also have partnerships with Sodexo here on campus, which is our dining service provider. They purchased our composting tumblers for us, and the director and the gentleman who is directly below him with Sodexo are avid gardeners. They're beekeepers, and they are just huge supporters of us in general with the garden. Benefits to our clients are huge. A lot of our produce that we get outside of the garden comes from the food bank, and a lot of times we kind of have to sift through it. It's not always good. That garden allows us to grow organic, fresh produce. And when I say fresh, we just go to the garden in the afternoon and pick the things we'll need for tonight's dinner. So nice for our clients to have that opportunity. We have had challenges over the years challenges, bug issues are something we've had over the years. Last year we had a big aphid infestation. Also, over the course of the last few years, finding crops that will fit the purpose of our meals. If we've got a meal of 400, we aren't going to want to be planting beans and trying to pick beans for 400 people. It just takes too much space, so we look for the larger things like squash, zucchini, cucumbers, those kinds of things. Another partnership I think I forgot to mention, Plant Services here has been hugely helpful. They put in a drip sprinkler system for us, and then the following year they bought a environmentally friendly timer, so it can actually sense how dry or moist the soil is, what the humidity is, and it waters just as an on-need basis. So that's been hugely helpful too. Anybody have questions about our garden or partnerships, ways we've used it?
Emily, how much do you invest in the garden in terms of finances? I mean, you said you have a lot of partnerships with people that help you out, but what kind of money is your campus kitchen putting into the garden?
We usually, I think last year we spent $50 on seeds. The soil was donated to us by Lowe's. I think they also donated some fertilizer as well. But I think this year we've spent about $15 to $20 on seeds.
Awesome.
A lot of times you can get those donated at, they'll have them at our Second Harvest Food Bank. Does a plant a row program for local gardeners that want to plant a row for the hungry, and they give away seeds a lot of times. Gonzaga is particular about the garden being organic, but as you dive into that organic, there are definitely different levels of being organic, to using organic seeds or just not using pesticides, those kinds of things.
So how do you define that? How do you guys meet organic standards?
We try to get organic seeds whenever possible, and we use organic fertilizer, and I don't go in there with a bunch of Roundup. we just pull our weeds, and we keep it as organic as possible.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay, that's
cool.
About
Thanks,
it.
Emily. One thing that I did not know a whole lot about Emily's garden before we prepared this webinar, but she sent me this video that is on Facebook, and I actually just posted it on the CKP national page of them building their garden. It's like a 3-minute time-lapse video, and it is so cool. They just built on this lawn, basically, on their campus. And now, if you look at this picture up on the screen, it's this beautiful garden. How much produce do you think you get out of it every year, Emily?
Over 1,000 pounds. It depends on what we grow. You can take up an entire bed of beans and not get that much weight of produce, or you can use that bed to grow squash and get hundreds and hundreds of pounds. That's
a good point.
That's how we've had to kind of trial by error. And that my office is in that little yellow house right there, so it's kind of nice to have the garden right there. It's beautiful. Another challenge I didn't mention earlier is that graduation here at Gonzaga is always Mother's Day. Mother's Day coincides with the gardening rule of thumb in my zone as the day when it's safe to plant plants outside. That means we're after our danger of frost. So one of the challenges is that most of the work in the garden actually is done when students aren't here. That has been a little bit of a challenge. We usually have to hire an intern, but there are some students around. But it also gives us an opportunity to bring other community members into the garden. And it has attracted students that may not have a huge interest in hunger issues, but they're really excited about the slow food movement. So we get different students attracted to our programs because of it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Oh, I'm sorry, everyone, if my computer just went out. All right, so next up we have Natalie from UGA.
Hi, I am Natalie, and I am the former Campus Kitchen Vista at UGA. And so our community garden is a little different in the sense that we don't, we're not in charge of running the garden ourselves. We just partnered with UGarden. And they actually started in 2010. It was a group of students who wanted a place to grow their own food. They wanted it to be organic, and they just really thought of it as a learning opportunity and a way for them to get free food. And the horticulture was really intrigued by it, and so there was some land on campus that wasn't being used that they were able to get a hold of. So they use that not only as a community garden for students and community members, but they also use it in classes to help get their point across, whether it's horticulture or master gardeners, local food certificates, and whatnot. What they did find was that they had a lot of food waste. So that's kind of how our partnership started, because we realized that we could use that food to supplement what we were getting from our local restaurants and grocery stores in order to provide meals to our seniors and their family. So we harvest about once a week, and like I said, we incorporate that in our meals, or sometimes we'll just give food bags out to the families and they can use the produce however they want. And we do a lot of nutrition ed. So at the senior center, every Monday there is a mobile market where UGarden will sell produce at a reduced price, and the seniors can use their SNAP card to pay for produce, and they would get it half off. We found that a lot of the seniors were unfamiliar with some of the produce that we were selling, or they were just looking for new ways of cooking those produce. So we started doing cooking demos, and that was really a great opportunity for us to talk about gardening, nutrition, and eating on a budget. In addition to that, we also do garden and nutrition outreach for the grandchildren. So one of the groups that we work with is grandparents raising grandchildren, and about every month the Council on Aging will have an event for the grandchildren. So we sometimes plan events either at the UGarden or at the garden at ACCA. And we'll have a harvest, we'll talk about whatever produce is in season, the different textures, different colors, you know, kind of let them sample some products, and we'll prepare a meal and enjoy and have some sort of discussion built around that. Let's see. In addition to that, I don't know. I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, we do go out there a lot and we work with UGarden in terms of developing nutrition ed or helping out with harvesting and whatnot, but we don't run the garden necessarily.
We've been having a momentary technical difficulty on our side, but I do have some pictures of UGarden that you all can see also. It's definitely on a different scale than Emily's garden at Gonzaga. There we go. Natalie, do you guys, so Emily was talking about how she grows the larger things so that fewer items can contribute to more meals. Do you know how they decide what to grow at UGarden, or does that impact what you guys are able to recover, anything like that?
Definitely. So we meet with UGarden, I would say every semester or every couple of months, and talk about what kinds of produce we would like to see. So for us, greens is very popular. amongst our seniors. So we definitely have lots of greens during this time of the year. And they also love tomatoes and peppers. So we do have some say in what is grown, but we also leave it up to you garden sometimes and kind of what the classes are working on or the students want to grow and harvest from that as well.
So for you all, what have been maybe the biggest advantages and the biggest challenges of working with another organization as opposed to running a garden yourself?
The biggest challenge, well, this year the weather has been really bad. That's definitely one thing, which is kind of out of our control. And then the other is sometimes we don't necessarily know, what we're going to get for that week. And so it's really hard for us to harvest the quantity that we would like, depending on what's going on at the garden. Sometimes we have research going on or students needing the produce for their class and whatnot, so we're very limited in that sense. And that can be very challenging when you're trying to, you don't have any fresh produce or fruits and vegetables being donated that week. One of the benefits is that we have, all of these different professors and students who are really, have their own expertise that they bring to the table, whether it's like mushrooms or herbs. And so we're able to collaborate with different people and do different things and use that in our meals or as a teaching opportunity for community members and for the families that we serve.
Awesome. So my last question for you is, and you may have addressed this, and I'm sorry if you did, how often are you able to bring your clients into the garden or to sort of connect, the food that they're eating to where it's coming from the U Garden?
For the grandchildren, we typically have events twice a semester. We'll go out to the garden and do some nutrition ed with the kids. And as far as the clients, there is another garden at the senior center, which U Garden helps to run and maintain. So the seniors are able to go out there and help with the harvest or just general maintenance as well.
That's great.
So they can do that on a weekly basis if they want to.
Anyone else have questions for Natalie? Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for sharing, Natalie. All right, we're going to fast forward a couple slides, and next up is my colleague Liz from UMass Boston.
Hey everyone, this is Liz. I am looking at these pictures, and these are like the gardens of my dreams. Here at UMass, our garden is very different from what Gonzaga and UGA have. So we don't have a garden that is ours. We are part of a community garden called the Columbia Point Community Garden. Boston has a network of community gardens, and this is one of them. So we maintain 4 beds in this community garden, and then the rest are maintained by people living around the community garden. So it's an interesting relationship. The garden is like a Boston Natural Areas Network garden, but it is on church property, the St. Christopher's Church. So they own the property, and they have a lot of say in kind of what happens in the garden. And then there's a woman who coordinates the whole garden, who is a nearby resident. So we kind of work with all of those entities. Primarily, we work with the woman who coordinates the garden in just kind of communicating with her kind of what's going on in the garden each season. We, I think, sort of help to keep the garden alive in a sense. We bring out groups of volunteers on a fairly regular basis to do work days in the garden, and so we just have 4 small beds, and we'll have some work for them to do in our beds, but typically it's kind of taking care of the garden as a whole. There's blueberry bushes that always need to be weeded, and mulch always needs to be put down, and things like that. So I think we really I view sort of our main purpose as just helping to keep this community garden alive as a resource for the surrounding area. We're on a funny spot in Boston. UMass is, if you're looking at this picture, UMass is kind of just on the other side of that tree line in the back. And it's on something called the Peninsula. And so this peninsula is kind of this insulated area of Boston with just a bunch of apartment buildings that include mostly young professionals, students, and then families who are living in subsidized apartments within those larger apartment complexes. So it's kind of a funny community, and the membership in the garden fluctuates significantly because of that. From what I understand, it's kind of hard to draw in community gardeners. So that's kind of where we step in, helping to maintain everything. In terms of our use of the garden, I started this position last January, about a little over a year ago. And from what I understand, the garden was never super productive for our uses. We just have a few small beds. We could maintain more if we wanted to. There's availability for that, but we just never have. This year is really the first year we're making a concerted effort to get out there and grow more, but we're also focusing a little more heavily on using the garden as a tool, a learning tool. So right next to the garden is a school, a Boston public school. It's an elementary and middle school, and we do the Building Blocks for Healthy Kids program with a couple groups of students over there. That's the program that's available on the CKP pantry online. And so we did that nutrition education program with a group of students in the fall, and then we developed an 8-week curriculum that's based around the garden that we're trying out this spring. We just kind of started that, and we've only brought the kids out there once. One of the biggest challenges we face here in Boston is that the weather is not cooperative at all. The ground right now is still frozen solid, and there's little sunlight. So that is something we're more aware of this year than ever, that we're trying to get the kids out there on Monday, but it's going to be like 27 degrees here, and I'm not going to bring a bunch of third graders outside in 27 degrees. So that's a big challenge for us is we can be out there in the cold kind of getting things ready, but there's only so much we can do if the ground is frozen. So that's an interesting challenge. We also face the challenge because of that scheduling our programming based on the Boston Public Schools schedule isn't too difficult, because Boston Public Schools go until the end of June, but my students are done at the middle of May, at which point very little has grown. So it's this interesting challenge, and we're kind of trying to figure out what to do better next season already, and this season has barely even started. So that's interesting. And then we face some other challenges that I think any urban community garden faces. Things get stolen, hoses get broken. It's just a little bit disorganized. So there's kind of always interesting challenges going on in the garden, but I think it's a really fantastic resource for the community, and I view us as kind of, if nothing else, we're helping to keep the garden thriving by providing volunteer resources throughout the season. So we're kind of at the beginning of really developing our work in the garden, and hopefully I'll have a lot more to report on next year as we work out the kinks this year. So
awesome.
Liz,
how do you all decide what to plant?
It has to do mostly with what we think. As I said, we use the garden as a learning tool, but obviously our intention is to use the food as well. So this year we decided to plant things that would work well with our program with the kids. So ideally things that grow kind of quickly, so radishes, which little kids don't really get excited about eating, but we're hoping they'll get excited about growing them and trying them. And we're doing lettuce. We're doing peas and tomatoes, which are things that you know, they probably won't be ready before, the peas might, but the tomatoes definitely won't be ready before our program is over with the kids, but it's something that they can really watch the progression of it. We're starting them indoors, and so they're going to watch the things grow in their classroom, and then we'll transplant them outdoors. So it has to do with kind of what we can plant that the kids will actually be able to see some progression in before we're done working with them. So that was kind of our main focus this go round, and those are all things that we can easily use in the kitchen if we don't use it all with the kids who we're teaching.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions for Liz? Okie doke. Thanks, Liz. And then last but definitely not least, we have a couple people from Baylor on the line to talk about their university garden.
Hey, how you doing? So this is Elizabeth, and Hannah actually had to leave. She had to get to a class. But so in the Baylor Community Garden, it was started about 4 years ago. It's not directly on campus. It's just a couple blocks away, and it's right next to Baylor graduate housing. And so we have 18 raised beds in a large raised herb circle. I kind of call it our robot garden because it's all on automatic waterers in the garden, and because they're raised beds and they all have weed cloths underneath all of that soil, there's not too much weeding that has to be done, which is really wonderful for us. But we grow, we ask our kitchen staff what they would like to cook with, and so we actually have a checklist of what will be in season. So before we plan out what we plant, we give our kitchen staff a checklist of, okay, what is something that you want to cook with this season, and how much of it, ideally, if we could give it to you, how much would you cook with it every week? Would you cook every time you're in the kitchen? Would you maybe cook with it once a month? Would you not cook with this at all? Would you not want to see it in your kitchen? And so it helps us to gauge more of, okay, we need 3 beds of tomatoes, or we should probably only have 1 bed of collards because they don't really like to cook with collards. So it helps us to figure out how much of each item we can plant, and it also gives our kitchen managers a good idea of what is in season at the time, so what they should be expecting and around what month, so that they're not asking us in December why we don't have any tomatoes or okra. And so it just helps everyone all the way around. We have been donating our produce to campus kitchens so that they can cook with it and get it to after-school programs. But we've also established a relationship with Meals and Wheels with our herbs. And so on Mondays when we harvest, they send a representative out with some harvest bins, and they say, okay, we're going to make an herbed cornbread, and we need rosemary and thyme and sage. And so we'll just snip it off right then and there, and they'll take it back and make the cornbread that same day and get it out to their clients for Meals and Wheels, which that's really cool to see. We've been trying to get students more aware that there is a garden since it's not directly on campus. We're trying to entice them to walk the 2 blocks away from campus. So we have hosted a movie night in the garden where we showed a movie. It's a film that was directed by a former Baylor grad, and it was a documentary on the local food movement and the importance of supporting local agriculture. And so we hosted a movie night in the garden, had about 300 people come out, which was awesome. And right now, just this week, we started up a garden club for kindergarten through 5th grade to get young kids in the garden. So we're following the Junior Master Gardener curriculum, And we really saw a need. There are a lot of great after-school programs and even garden club programs in the area. But if you're not a part of that school, and if you're not a part of the after-school program of that school, you don't have access to those gardens. So we wanted to open up our garden to homeschooled kids, to kids who aren't part of an after-school program, to kids who haven't had a garden put in their school. And so we have about 26 kids signed up for this Junior Master Garden Club that we just started this week. And so we will be doing environmental lessons in the garden. They helped us plant our lettuce yesterday, and our nutrition science students from Campus Kitchens come out and do our snacks with us. And so, for example, yesterday we talked about photosynthesis and that whole process, and then we had a snack of lettuce, since we were specifically talking about leaves and why they're green and how that whole process happens. So we had a snack of fresh lettuce from the garden. And then we talked about the nutrition facts on the back of a ranch label bottle, and what do the nutrition facts mean, and what is that ingredients list. And then we made our own ranch dressing using yogurt and spices and olive oil, and they got to mix it up, and they get so excited to shake it. But just explaining, what are processed foods and what are fresh foods, and what ingredients could you read on the back of the label versus this recipe that you just made that you know what all of these ingredients actually are and you can pronounce them. And so we're trying to get them more nutrition-minded and good nutrition, and also that fresh produce that they are going to be growing themselves in the garden. We helped out with World Hunger Relief is a teaching and training farm here in Waco, and they host a farm day twice a year, and so we did a farm-to-table meal with them. And so half of the produce came from us and half of it came from World Hunger Relief. And we helped with all of the meal prep since the students are ServSafe certified, and so we were able to have all of the proper kitchen regulations happening, and everything was up to code. And so we were able to help them with that farm-to-table meal and a lot of things that they wouldn't have been able to do without our students who were so knowledgeable. So that was super exciting. Some of our challenges fall along the same lines as other people have already mentioned. Things like a lot of the work happens in the summertime when students aren't here. So that has been hard, but we also have students who take summer classes, and then we can offer internships to those students. And in the winter, being in Texas, you would think that we wouldn't have too many winter problems, but this winter has been crazy for everyone. And we even got a bad ice storm a couple weeks ago and had to pull all of our winter crops because they got frostbitten. So that's been a challenge this year for sure. But are there any questions about the Baylor Garden?
How many pounds of produce do you guys usually harvest each year?
That is an excellent question, and it completely varies with the crop. So, but right before Christmas in the month of December, I had about 60 pounds of cabbage, which is ridiculously heavy when you start adding all of those heads of cabbage up. But then for something like spinach or leaf lettuce, 10 pounds doesn't sound like very much as compared to 60 pounds of cabbage, but 10 pounds of spinach is a ridiculous amount. And so it's I don't know exactly what the tally for this past season was, but each month would vary. We could have 100 pounds in a month, and we could have 20 pounds in a month. So it kind of just varies, and the herbs are super light, but we give herbs to Meals and Wheels every week. So it's hard to go by pounds of how well the garden is producing and how much it is producing.
I'm glad you brought up herbs too, because using fresh herbs in your cooking is a really great way to enhance any sort of flavor. And herbs are pretty easy to grow, and easy to grow a lot in a pretty small space. So I think that's also a great way to get started. Elizabeth, you are a Vista, correct, who is just responsible for the garden? Is that pretty much your job right now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so maybe this isn't a good of a question for you, but for anyone else who presented or who has a garden, I'm wondering where you get, all of the knowledge it requires to run a successful garden. So who is responsible for making sure you're planting correctly at the right times and, know when things are ready to harvest and taking care of plants, et cetera, et cetera?
I can tell. This is Emily at Gonzaga. That's me. I have a gardening background, but we also do have an AmeriCorps volunteer every year, and we like to hire someone with some gardening knowledge.
Okay. And Elizabeth, did you have prior gardening knowledge?
Yes. I interned for a couple years out at the World Hunger Relief Training Farm, and I'm a master gardener and master naturalist.
Awesome.
This is Liz in Boston, and that's actually kind of where another one of our challenges comes into play. Similar to Emily, I'm sort of the one that does that. I have a farming background, but I can't always be out there, and I'm trying to get to a point where this garden is not my baby but somebody else's, because I just don't have enough time to be out there. So that's an interesting challenge on our end, is finding students who are confident and knowledgeable enough to take the reins to some degree at least. And I have a couple great students on board now, so that's a good thing.
This is Elizabeth. One of the things that we do at Baylor is within our executive team of students for Campus Kitchens, we have a position that is the garden manager, and that's Hannah, who wasn't able, she had to step out, but that way she's an environmental science major, and so we're also pulling from the nutrition science students who want to be part of Campus Kitchens, or people who want to be a part of our tutoring program, who might be in education, but we're also trying to pull from the environmental science department and have those student leaders, and others might do this as well, but that's one way that we've also been able to incorporate the students in taking on some of those leadership roles.
That's awesome. All right, does anyone else have any questions for any of our presenters? All right, I'll take that as a no. Thank you to you four schools that shared with us your garden knowledge. I personally learned a lot, and a great first day of spring topic, if I do say so myself. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and taking the time to do that. This webinar was recorded, and so I'll be posting it on the pantry under, there's a section that's about like fresh and local programming where this will live in case anyone needs to come back and reference it. And then if you do come up with questions later about what someone who presented said, just shoot me an email and I'd be happy to connect you with them. And that is all. So I hope to see a lot of you in Chicago in a couple weeks at our conference, and otherwise we'll be talking next month. Thanks so much, guys.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.